There I was, stuck at the airport, my suitcase still clutched in my hand, watching Vivienne's private jet shoot up into the sky, leaving me in the dust. I'm Owen Archer, just a regular guy who thought this was gonna be our big anniversary getaway, something she'd been talking up for months. We'd been tossing around plans since January, or at least, I was under the impression we were. I'd packed my favorite button-ups, even dropped some cash on a new camera lens to catch all the moments I figured we'd share. But then I saw her, cackling with her shiny crew of assistants and buddies, all decked out in fancy sunglasses and heels that clicked like they owned the whole damn place. "Sorry, it's a girls' trip now," she said, flashing that smug little smirk that always made me feel like I was the punchline to her private joke. I could have lost it, caused a scene right there in the middle of the terminal, but that's not me, I don't grovel. Her laughter was still bouncing around in my skull as I spun around and headed straight for the first-class counter. The woman behind the desk didn't bat an eye when I asked for the next flight to Paris. I had the miles, the money, and a fire in my chest screaming that I didn't need Vivienne's go-ahead to live my own life. Barely an hour later, I was strapped into a comfy seat, sipping coffee as the plane rolled down the tarmac. I wasn't chasing after her, I was cutting loose. 10 minutes after her jet took off, I knew she'd get the email I'd set up that morning, right after she left me high and dry. It was from our shared lawyer, a little surprise I'd arranged with a few clicks. Subject line, Preliminary Separation Agreement. I could picture her up there, those perfectly sculpted brows shooting up, her lips parting in that quiet little gasp she lets out when she's thrown off her game. She'd be 30,000 feet up, surrounded by her giggling squad, and suddenly pale as a sheet. Good. Let her stew. When my plane hit the ground in Paris, my phone was already going wild, buzzing like a kicked-over beehive. I didn't bother checking it, just let it hum in my pocket as I stepped into the warm, chaotic buzz of Charles de Gaulle. Later, I'd find out there were 155 messages, 155 desperate pleas, rants, and apologies she'd hammered out while I was sipping wine over the Atlantic. But right then, I didn't give a rip. I was in Paris, and for once, it wasn't about her, it was about me. I slung my bag over my shoulder, tugged my jacket straight, and stepped out into a city that felt like it was about to flip my whole world upside down. The air smelled like fresh-baked bread and a new kind of freedom, and I wasn't looking back. Vivienne could keep her jet, her posse, her smirks. I had a ticket to something way better, and I wasn't waiting for her to sign off on it. This was my runway, and I was ready to take off. I sank into my first-class seat, the low hum of the plane's engines rumbling through me as we climbed high above the Atlantic. I'm Owen Archer, and for the first time in forever, I wasn't jetting off to keep pace with Vivienne's crazy schedule or to play the part of her arm-candy husband at some swanky event. This was my flight, my call, and man, it felt good. The flight attendant handed me a glass of champagne, and I watched the bubbles fizz up and burst, each one fading away like the promises Vivienne had made over the years. We started out as a team, or so I thought, building her high-end tech brand from late-night ideas scribbled in our tiny apartment. Back then, it felt like our dream, but somewhere along the line, it turned into hers alone. I ended up as the guy holding her purse at red carpet galas, flashing a fake smile for the cameras while she stole the show. "Owen, you're so great at having my back," she'd say, like that was some big compliment. I'd just nod, go along with it, let her bask in the spotlight. But now, gazing out at the endless sea of clouds, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I'd been wiped out, turned into a prop in her flawless little play. The champagne had a sharp, almost bitter bite, but I sipped it anyway. I dug into my carry-on and pulled out the fancy leather journal Vivienne had gifted me last Christmas. It was one of those high-end presents she was nuts about, gorgeous on the outside, all class, but hollow inside, not even a scribbled note from her. Classic Vivienne move. I cracked it open, and those empty pages stared up at me like they were daring me to do something real. My pen lingered for a moment, then I pressed it to the paper and jotted down the first words that felt truly mine: Owen's Paris, nobody else's. It wasn't some flowery poem, but it was honest, and that was plenty for me. I leaned back in my seat, letting those words settle in my chest. Paris wasn't just a place I was headed to anymore, it was my way of saying I was done with her game. I was through chasing after Vivienne, waiting for her to toss me a crumb of attention. This trip was about figuring out who I am when I'm not just Vivienne Archer's sidekick. The plane gave a little sway, and I started mapping out my next steps. In a few hours, I'd touch down, check into some low-key hotel, none of those over-the-top spots she'd pick, and just wander. No schedules, no press hounding me, no one barking orders about where to stand or what to say. I'd stroll the streets, grab whatever food smelled amazing, maybe even pull out my camera and snap some shots for me, not her social media. That thought brought a real grin to my face, not the fake smile I'd plastered on for years. I glanced back at the journal, running my finger over the words I'd written. Owen's Paris. It felt like a promise of freedom. I wasn't sure what I'd stumble across in that city. Maybe a cozy cafe with killer coffee, or a quiet spot to clear my head, or hell, maybe even someone who'd see me for me, not as Vivienne's shadow. The thought of meeting someone new crossed my mind for a second, but I shoved it aside. This wasn't about finding a replacement for her. It was about taking back who I am. The flight attendant swung by, offering a warm towel, and I grabbed it, wiping my hands like I could wash away the last 10 years of playing backup to Vivienne's star. Outside the window, the sky was shifting to hues of pink and gold, the sun slipping below the horizon. I didn't touch my phone, didn't care to read whatever messages she'd sent. Let her sit and wonder where I'd gone. For once, I wasn't the one hanging on her every move. I shut the journal, slipped it back into my bag, and polished off the champagne. The plane steadied itself, cruising smooth and confident, carrying me toward a city I'd always loved but never really explored on my own terms. I didn't need her private jet, her plans, or her stamp of approval. I had my seat, my pen, and a fresh start. Paris was calling, and I was ready to show up, not as Vivienne's husband, but as Owen. Just Owen, the guy who'd finally quit fading into the background. I stepped off the plane at Charles de Gaulle, my legs a bit creaky from the long flight, but my head buzzing with something I hadn't felt in ages, a sense of what could be. I'm Owen Archer, and I was in Paris, not because Vivienne dragged me here for some glitzy photo op, but because I damn well chose to be. The airport was a whirlwind of voices, French, English, and a dozen other languages all jumbled together, and I moved through it like a guy shaking off a long nap. I snagged my bag from the carousel, tossed it over my shoulder, and made a beeline for the exit, itching to soak in the city. But before I could get too far, a smooth, familiar voice cut through the noise. Owen Archer, in the flesh. I turned, and there he was, Damien Laurent, lounging against a pillar with that laid-back grin of his. Damien was one of Vivienne's old investors, a sharp dude who knew how to make a buck and had a rep for not putting up with her nonsense. He'd bailed on her company a couple of years back over some creative differences, and now he was her biggest rival in the tech world. Damien, I said, giving his hand a quick shake. What's got you here? He let out a chuckle, tweaking the cuff of his sharp tailored jacket. Probably the same as you, man, slipping out from under her grip. Heard about that airport move. Pretty slick, by the way. I gave a half smirk, wondering how he'd gotten the scoop so fast, but Damien always had his finger on the pulse. Well, I wasn't about to sit there and bawl over it, I said with a shrug. Damien gave a nod, like he'd figured I'd handle it that way. Smart move. You're not the only one she's tried to shove aside, you know. She yanked my invite to her big summit this weekend, but I'm thinking I'll show up anyway. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a cream-colored envelope, and slid it my way. You ought to come along, Owen. She's supposed to be the star of the show, or was. It'd be a shame if she didn't spot a couple of familiar faces in the audience. I grabbed the invitation, turning it over in my hands, feeling its weight. It was for a fancy tech summit in Paris, one of those high-roller gigs where CEOs and hotshots slap each other on the back. Vivienne had been gearing up for weeks, practicing her keynote speech in our living room while I played the dutiful husband, nodding along. "She has no clue you're gonna be there, does she?" Damien asked, a sly spark in his eyes. "Nope," I said, a grin creeping across my face. "But she's about to find out." He slapped my shoulder, letting out a hearty laugh. "That's the attitude. Come on, let's grab a drink, you look like you could use one." We wandered into a bar just outside the terminal, all slick glass and moody lighting, and ordered a couple of whiskeys. That first sip stung my throat, but it steadied me, anchoring me in this new world where I wasn't just dancing to Vivienne's tune, I was calling my own shots. Damien kicked back in his chair, giving his drink a lazy swirl. "So, what's the game plan, Owen? You're here, she's up there probably freaking out. What's your next move?" I mulled it over, the invitation still clutched in my hand. "I'm not sure yet. I just needed to break free, get some space to think, but this," I gave the envelope a tap. "This feels like the start of something." He nodded, like he totally got where I was coming from. "She's built a lot riding on your shoulders. Those early marketing ideas that launched her brand. I know whose head they came out of." I shot him a look, caught off guard that he'd bring it up. "That was ages ago." "Doesn't make it any less true," he said, taking a slow sip. "She's a pro at soaking up the credit, and you've been too good at letting her. Maybe it's time to flip that script." His words landed like a punch I didn't see coming. I'd spent years convincing myself it didn't matter, that I was fine propping her up, staying in the background. But sitting there with Damien, the whiskey warming me from the inside, it hit me how much I'd let slip through my fingers. Paris wasn't just an escape anymore, it was my shot to take back what was mine. We polished off our drinks, and Damien stood, tossing a few euros on the table. "Catch you at the summit, Owen. Don't go easy on her." He strolled off, leaving me with the invitation and a head buzzing with new ideas. I slipped it into my jacket, paid my share, and stepped outside. The air was sharp, the city stretching out in front of me like a challenge. I wasn't sure what I'd do at that summit, but one thing was clear, Vivienne was about to realize I wasn't her shadow anymore. I flagged down a cab, gave the driver the name of a hotel I'd found online, nothing flashy, just my kind of place, and watched Paris's lights dance by. This was my moment, and I wasn't backing off. I woke up to the sound of Paris humming outside my window, a gentle pulse of life that felt like it was on a different planet from Vivienne's glossy, chaotic world. I'm Owen Archer, and I'd checked into L'Hôtel Matin Bleu, a cozy little spot tucked away in Montmartre's hills. It wasn't the kind of place she'd ever choose, no grand marble lobbies or fawning concierges, but it was exactly what I needed. The room was small, with old wooden floors that creaked and a window showing off winding cobblestone streets below. I didn't need some penthouse to feel like I was living. I threw on a jacket, grabbed my camera, and headed out, the crisp morning air hitting me like a fresh start. The streets were tight, lined with weathered stone buildings and flower boxes bursting with color. For the first time in years, I wandered with no plan, no agenda, just me and the city. Every trip with Vivienne was like a military operation, packed schedules, endless meetings, and staged photo ops. But today, I was just some guy with a camera, strolling through a city that didn't give a hoot about who I was hitched to. I pulled up at a little cafe, the kind with rickety tables and waiters who let you take your time. The coffee was bold, the croissant buttery and crisp, and I just sat there, soaking in the scene, artists sketching on pads, old guys flipping through newspapers, kids darting after pigeons. Nobody bugged me about Vivienne's latest product drop or told me to flash a smile for a snapshot. It was just me, living in the moment, and I swear my shoulders finally unclenched for the first time in ages. After breakfast, I wandered toward the art district, my camera dangling around my neck like a buddy I hadn't seen in years. Taking pictures used to be my jam, way before Vivienne started treating it like a joke. "That's a sweet little hobby, Owen," she'd say, like I was messing around with a kid's toy. I'd quit talking about it, quit lugging the camera around unless she needed a shot for her social media. But here in Paris, I raised it to my eye and started clicking: street corners, weathered walls, a lady selling flowers from a cart. Through the lens, everything seemed clearer, more vivid, like I could grab hold of the world instead of watching it slip away. A couple of locals took notice. An older dude in a beret and a woman with a scarf nodded just right. "You a photographer?" the guy asked, his English a bit choppy but warm. "Just messing around," I said, lowering the camera. "This city's something else." He beamed, full of pride, and they started chatting me up about my gear and the kinds of shots I liked. Not once did Vivienne or her brand come up. It felt like I'd finally stepped out of her long shadow and into my own space. That evening, I followed a flyer I'd spotted tacked to a cafe wall, pointing me to a rooftop art show nearby. The place was decked out with strings of lights, the air heavy with conversation and wisps of cigarette smoke. I roamed around, sipping cheap wine, checking out sculptures and paintings that hit me as raw and honest. Then I ran into Camille Durand. She was posted up by her exhibit, a wild setup of wires and screens flashing images that shattered and pieced themselves back together. Her dark hair was tied back in a messy bun, a smear of paint on her cheek, and her eyes had this way of cutting right through you. "What's it make you think?" she asked, tilting her head toward her work. "Feels like it's breaking down and building itself back up all at once," I said, hoping I wasn't sounding dumb. Her smile was slow, like she knew something I didn't. "That's dead on. It's about wiping the slate clean and starting fresh. You get it." We got to talking, her voice calm but solid, and she explained how her piece was about shedding the old versions of yourself to uncover what's real underneath. "Sometimes you gotta vanish a bit to be truly seen," she said, and it landed like a gut punch. I'd been fading away for years, swallowed up in Vivienne's spotlight. Maybe I didn't have to keep doing that. I mentioned my camera, how I'd started using it again that day, and she gave a nod, like she was picking up on more than I was saying. "Come back tomorrow," she said. "I'm running a workshop. Bring your photos." I left that rooftop with her words bouncing around in my brain, the city lights smearing into a haze below. Montmartre felt like it was setting me free, each step pulling me farther from the guy I used to be. I didn't need Vivienne's okay or her fancy jets. I had my camera, a map stained with coffee, and an invite from a stranger to keep pushing forward. Paris was mine now, and I wasn't about to let it go. I got back to L'Hôtel Matin Bleu after that rooftop show, my mind still reeling from Camille's words and how Paris was starting to feel like it belonged to me. I'm Owen Archer, and I'd been riding a high all day, roaming the streets, snapping pictures, chatting with folks who didn't see me as Vivienne's husband. The hotel room was hushed, with only the faint groan of the floorboards and the soft buzz of Paris drifting in from outside. I slung my jacket over a chair, kicked off my sneakers, and flopped onto the bed, staring up at the ceiling. My phone sat on the nightstand, dead and quiet. I hadn't powered it up since the airport, not ready to deal with whatever Vivienne was dishing out. But something tugged at me now, maybe I itched to know just how much she was freaking out. I grabbed the phone, hit the power button, and watched it hum back to life. The screen flared, and bam, 155 messages, a tidal wave of notifications, every single one from her. I scrolled through the previews, not clicking yet, just letting them pile up like a car crash I couldn't peel my eyes from. The early ones were pure Vivienne, all cocky and smug. "Still moping at the airport," one said. "You're being such a drama queen," read another. I could practically hear that sharp chuckle she'd let slip, thinking she had me all figured out, probably sent while she was toasting champagne with her crew, betting I'd just sit tight for her return. By message 20, her vibe had shifted, no more smirks. "Where the hell are you?" she typed, and a few later, "Owen, talk to me." I kept swiping, the words starting to blur. By 45, she was fuming. "What did you do?" That had to be when she saw the email, the little present from our lawyer about the separation. I grinned to myself, picturing her up there at 30,000 feet, frantically scrolling her inbox, her manicured nails stabbing the screen with every line she read. The messages kept flooding in, a storm of her losing her grip. "You can't pull this on me," she wrote at 96, like I was the one who left her stranded at an airport. Then the apologies kicked in. "Owen, we need to talk, please," hit at 124. "I'm sorry," she said at 142, and I nearly laughed out loud. Vivienne didn't do apologies unless she was cornered like a cat. The last one, 155, felt different. "We have to fix this." No barking orders, no sass, just a raw plea. I stared at it for a good minute, the screen glowing in the dim room. My thumb lingered over the reply button, but I didn't touch it. What was there to say? She'd ditched me, laughed it off, and now she was scrambling because I'd finally quit playing her game. I switched the phone off, the screen fading to black, and set it back on the nightstand. Let her stew. Let her deal. I wasn't her errand boy anymore, jumping the second she snapped her fingers. I got up, shuffled to the window, and cracked it open, letting the chilly night air sweep in. Paris sprawled out below, all sparkling lights and sleepy streets, and something clicked inside me, maybe calm, maybe strength. She could fire off 1,000 texts, and it wouldn't change a damn thing. I was here, living my life, while she was up there, spiraling in her private jet bubble. I reached for my camera on the table, flipping through the photos I'd taken that day, the flower cart lady, the cracked stone wall, the old dude in the beret. They weren't flawless, but they were mine, and that felt better than any polished shot I'd ever taken for Vivienne's feed. I thought about Camille's workshop coming up, her talk about erasure and starting over. Maybe that's what this was, me scraping away the old me, letting Vivienne's barrage of messages bury the guy I used to be. I didn't owe her a response, didn't owe her my time. She'd figure out soon enough I wasn't crawling back to beg. I slid into bed, the sheets cool against my skin, and shut my eyes. The phone stayed dark, the messages ignored. For the first time in years, I drifted off without Vivienne's voice nagging in my head, just the gentle murmur of Paris lulling me toward tomorrow. That I woke up to sunlight streaming through the curtains of my room at Lodel Matin Blue, a gentle glow that made Paris look like it belonged in a frame. I'm Owen Archer, and for once, I didn't bolt upright to Vivienne's voice snapping orders or her phone screaming with alerts. It was just me, the stillness, and a whole day to mold however I wanted. I stretched out, feeling the dull ache in my legs from yesterday's rambling, and cracked a smile. Today was Camille's workshop, and I was pumped to see what it had in store. I hopped in the shower, threw on a cozy sweater and jeans, and grabbed my camera along with a few photos I'd printed at a shop nearby. Saint-Germain was a bit of a hike from Montmartre, but I didn't mind the trek. Every street in this city had something new to show me. The sidewalks were buzzing with folks, the air rich with the scent of fresh bread and coffee. I swung by a stall for a pain au chocolate, munching as I walked, crumbs dusting my jacket like little souvenirs. By the time I got to the workshop, a snug studio perched above a bookstore, I felt like I'd already squeezed a full morning out of the day. Camille was there, fiddling with screens and cables, her hands quick but steady. "You showed up," she said, flashing that sly half-smile. "Ready to rip your soul apart?" I chuckled, holding up my camera. "Something close to it." She waved me inside, and I joined a small group, mostly artists, their fingers smudged with paint, carrying a quiet kind of spark. Camille explained the workshop was about digital self-portraits, but not the glossy kind you'd slap on social media. "We're tearing ourselves down," she said, her voice calm but firm, stripping away who we used to be to find what's still there. I gave a nod, not entirely sure what she meant but ready to give it a shot. She handed me a tablet linked to a projector, showing me how to upload a photo and start dismantling it, pixel by pixel, layer by layer. I flipped through my pictures, then paused on one Vivienne had posted a while back. It was us at some ritzy gala, her sparkling in a glitzy dress, me barely in the frame, grinning like an afterthought. She'd captioned it with some nonsense about power couples, but I'd always hated it, felt like I was half erased. I loaded it up, and the image splashed across the screen, larger than life. Camille leaned in. "That's a solid pick to start. What do you want to do with it?" I didn't even hesitate. "Wipe her out." She grinned, guiding me on how to drag a tool across the screen, erasing Vivienne piece by piece. Her dress melted away, her face blurred into nothing, leaving just me, a jagged, incomplete figure. But I wasn't finished. I kept at it, breaking down the edges, the backdrop, that fake smile I'd plastered on that night. The pixels scattered like ash, and I started rebuilding, pulling my outline to the center, fleshing it out with lines and shadows from the Paris shots I'd taken. The gala vanished, replaced by cobblestones and street lamps, until it was just me, standing tall and whole. The room was silent, everyone deep in their own projects, but I could feel Camille's eyes on me. "That's you," she said, nodding at the screen. "Not the guy you were pretending to be." I stared at it, my shape, my city, no hint of her. "Yeah," I said, my voice quiet. "I think you're right." We spent hours there, tweaking and shredding, the room humming with this weird mix of focus and freedom. I didn't stop at that one photo. I dug up more from our old life together and tore them apart, a beach trip where she'd made me hold her bag, a dinner where I was stuck snapping pics of her plate. All of them, gone, transformed into something fresh. By the end, I had a collection of images, each one a fragment of myself I'd lost track of. Camille strolled over as I saved the final one. "You just put your first real truth out there," she said, her gaze steady on mine. "Feels pretty damn good, doesn't it?" I nodded, words failing me for once. Man, it felt good, better than good, like I'd finally yanked something back that Vivienne had buried under years of her dazzling spotlight. I left the studio as the sun sank low, clutching the tablet under my arm, those images seared into my mind like a brand. Paris shimmered around me, all warm and golden, and I strolled back to the hotel with a lightness I didn't even know I could feel. Vivienne's world didn't have a hold on me anymore, I was tearing it down, bit by bit, and building something real, something mine, in its place. I hopped out of a cab into the crisp Paris evening, the summit venue's lights glowing ahead like a signal fire. I'm Owen Archer, and tonight wasn't about ducking into the shadows, it was about stepping up. Damien had roped me into this dinner, the one Vivienne was supposed to run, and I'd agreed without a second's hesitation. The invitation was still tucked in my pocket, wrinkled from being fiddled with all day, but it felt like a pass to something way bigger than just a fancy meal. I tugged my jacket straight, not some gaudy one she'd have forced on me, just a plain one I actually liked, and strode inside. The place was all sleek glass and gold trim, crammed with tech bigwigs and investors in suits worth more than my old pickup. I scanned the crowd, half bracing for Vivienne to swoop in with that queen bee grin of hers, but she was nowhere in sight. Her name was still on the table settings, though, Owen Archer, keynote speaker. Guess she hadn't pulled the plug yet. I spotted Damien by the bar, nursing a drink and schmoozing with some dude in a bow tie. He caught my eye and waved me over. "Looking sharp, Owen," he said, passing me a glass of something dark and potent. "Ready to shake things up?" I took a sip, the burn sliding down my throat. "She's not here, is she?" He shook his head, a smirk playing on his lips. "Not yet. Rumor is she's gone dark since that email landed. Her team's in a frenzy." Before I could dig deeper, someone grabbed my arm, Chloe Martin, Vivienne's assistant, all frazzled, her blonde hair slipping loose from its tidy bun. "Owen, thank God," she hissed, tugging me aside. "She's been a mess since that legal bomb hit. Nobody knows why she's not here tonight." I raised an eyebrow, keeping my tone cool. "That's her problem to sort out, Chloe, not mine." She blinked, clearly thrown off. "You're not worried about her?" "Nope," I said, flashing a slight grin to keep her guessing. "She can spin her own tale. I'm busy writing mine." Chloe stared for a second, then gave a slow nod, backing off as the crowd started drifting toward the tables. I found my seat, Damien had made damn sure I wasn't stuck in the nosebleeds, and settled in, the room's energy washing over me like a wave. The keynote was about to kick off, some substitute guy fumbling with his notes, when the MC took the mic instead. "Ladies and gentlemen," he boomed, voice filling the space, "before we start, let's give a nod to someone here tonight, Owen Archer, the guy who came up with the original marketing ideas that Vivienne Archer's empire was built on, without so much as a thank you." The room went dead quiet, head swiveling, eyes locking onto me. I froze for a split second, my glass halfway to my mouth, then set it down as murmurs and gasps spread like wildfire. Damien leaned in, grinning like a kid who'd just pulled a prank. "Told you we'd stir the pot." The silence hung thick, then a lone clap started, slow, then picking up steam, until the whole place erupted in applause. I stood, giving a quick nod, not sure what else to do with myself. The MC kept talking, going on about innovation and unsung heroes, but it was all a blur. My heart was hammering, not from stage fright, but from something deeper, relief, maybe, or the sweet sting of being seen. For years, I'd let her hog the credit, told myself it didn't matter as long as the company was killing it. But it did matter, and now everybody in that room knew it. The dinner carried on, plates clinking, chatter swelling, but I felt like I was floating above it all. Folks came up afterward, shaking my hand, asking about those early days, wanting the real story. "You're the real deal, man," a tech blogger I recognized said, shaking his head. "She never once brought you up." "Didn't need to," I replied, keeping my tone easy. "I was there, doing my part." Damien caught up with me later as the crowd started to thin out. "You played that like a champ, Owen. She's gonna lose it when she hears about this." "Good," I shot back, and I meant every word. "Let her stew." We stepped out into the chilly Paris night, the sharp air biting at my face. I didn't need Vivienne here to feel the weight of what just went down. That applause was still ringing in my ears, not just for what I'd done back then, but for what I was pulling off now, standing tall, breaking free. Chloe's words about Vivienne spiraling stuck with me, though. Part of me wondered what she was up to right then, maybe pacing a hotel suite, barking at her phone, scrambling to twist this mess into her favor, but I didn't dwell on it. This dinner, this night, didn't need her shadow looming over it. I'd walked in on my own and left feeling bigger, stronger. Paris had handed me that gift, and I wasn't about to hand it back. The next evening, I wandered along the Seine, the water catching the city lights like a shattered mirror glowing gold. I'm Owen Archer, and I was still buzzing from that summit dinner, the gasps, the claps, the way folks looked at me like I was somebody worth noticing. It was a high, no doubt, but it didn't quiet this nagging itch deep in my chest. Vivienne had texted again that morning, just one line slicing through the chaos of the past few days, "Let's meet." No cameras, just us. I'd stared at it over my coffee, steam curling up from the mug, and against my better sense, I'd typed back, "All right. Café Lumière, 7 p.m. Now here I was, heading to see her, not sure what I was after but feeling like it was time to face her head-on. The café was a cozy little spot, tucked down a side street with round tables spilling onto the sidewalk. I got there early, ordered a glass of red wine, and parked myself outside, watching the river glide by. She rolled in 10 minutes late, classic Vivienne, her heels clicking like a countdown. She had sunglasses on, even though the sun was long gone, her expression hidden behind them. She eased into the chair across from me, setting her bag down with that polished grace she'd mastered. "You humiliated me," she said, no greeting, no warm-up, her voice tight like she'd been bottling it up too long. I took a slow sip of wine, letting her words float there for a beat. "Nah," I said, setting the glass down. "You did that to yourself. I just stopped cleaning up your mess." She peeled off the sunglasses, her eyes sharp but weary all at once. "That email, Owen, the summit, what's your game? Trying to destroy me?" I leaned back, keeping my tone steady. "I'm not out to do anything to you. I'm just done playing along. That's it. You ditched me at the airport, laughed it off. Did you really think I'd just eat that? She flinched, just a quick twitch, but I caught it. It was a screw-up, she said, her voice softer now. I got swept up with the girls. The trip wasn't meant to go like that. But it did, I said, and it's been that way for years, me waiting around, you calling the shots. I'm not your sidekick anymore, Vivienne. She stared at me, her fingers drumming on the table, that nervous tick she'd never copped to. So that's it. You're just bailing after everything we put into this. You put into it, I said, and damn, it felt good to let it out. I pitched in, sure, threw out ideas, propped you up, but you grabbed the glory, the control, and left me in the dust. I'm not begging for a pat on the back. I'm just done acting like that's enough. Her jaw clenched, but she didn't push back, maybe she couldn't. Fine, let's talk settlements, she said, switching tracks like she always did when she was losing ground. We can sort this out, keep it smooth. I reached into my pocket, pulled out a card, Helen's, my lawyer, and slid it across the table. Talk to her from now on. We're finished here. She glanced at the card, then back at me, her mouth opening like she was gearing up to argue, but I was already on my feet. Owen, hold on, she started, but I didn't stop. I left her there, the wine untouched, the card staring up at her like a challenge. The shift in power hit me as I walked away from that cafe, creeping in slow at first, then slamming home all at once. I didn't owe Vivienne that talk, didn't owe her my time or any explanations. She'd had years of me bending over backward, tweaking myself to fit her world, keeping things running. Not anymore. I crossed the street, the Seine shimmering beside me, and felt a weight lift off my chest. This wasn't her call now, it was mine, and I'd made it. I kept moving, the city wrapping around me like an old friend. Paris had given me a voice, a backbone, and I wasn't about to hand them over. She could sit there till dawn, scheming her next play, but it wouldn't change a damn thing. I was free, not just from her, but from the version of myself I'd let her mold. The river rolled on, calm and steady, and I fell into step with it, my strides lighter than they'd been in ages. I woke up the next morning with sunlight slipping through the blinds of my room at Lodelmatten Blue, a quiet buzz of energy humming in my chest. I'm Owen Archer, and after last night, leaving Vivienne at that cafe table, her voice fading into the background, I felt like I'd finally snipped the last string tying me to her universe. I didn't bother checking my phone, didn't care if she'd fired off another text. Today was about me, not her, and I had a spark of an idea taking shape. I grabbed a coffee from the hotel's little kitchen, the bitter kick waking me up as I settled by the window, watching Montmartre come to life. Down below, the streets were stirring, vendors setting up stalls, folks heading to work. I started thinking about those photos I'd taken, the ones I'd reworked with Camille. They weren't just snapshots anymore, they were chunks of me, raw and true. What if I put them out there, not to rub it in Vivienne's face, not to prove anything, but for myself? I pulled out my notebook and started jotting down ideas: gallery, show, Paris. By the time my coffee was gone, I had a plan locked in. I dialed Camille, catching her just as she was stepping out. Hey, it's Owen, I said, pacing the room. You know anything about snagging a gallery space? She let out a laugh, that easy sound that made everything seem doable. You're not messing around, are you? Dead serious, I said. I found a spot near Le Marais. It's small, but it's got soul. You planning a show? Yeah, those portraits from the workshop, plus the street shots I got this week. I want to hang them up. She didn't skip a beat. Count me in. Meet me there in an hour. I hung up, grabbed my camera and the printed photos, and headed out the door. Le Marais was a tangle of tight streets and old buildings, pulsing with galleries and cafes. The spot Camille picked was just right: clean white walls, scuffed wooden floors, and a big window letting in streams of light. The owner, a gruff guy named Louis, agreed to a short-term rental, grumbling about nutty artists but tossing me the keys. Camille rolled in with a toolbox and a grin, and we got to work. We put up the photos, my silhouette against Paris streets, the broken-down gala shot, the flower cart lady caught mid-laugh. I named the show Uncropped, a title that felt like it fit, like I was finally claiming my place in the picture. We spent the whole day hanging frames, nudging the layout until it felt solid, like something worth seeing. By the next afternoon, we opened the doors, nothing glitzy, just a sign out front and some word-of-mouth buzz. People started drifting in, mostly locals at first, then a few tourists, their chatter echoing off the walls as they checked out my work. I hung back, watching them pause, point, talk. A lady in a red coat bought the flower cart shot, saying it brought back memories of her grandma. A bearded guy grilled me about the tech behind the digital pieces. It wasn't a packed house, but it was enough. 2 days later, every single print was sold. I couldn't wipe the grin off my face. Damien swung by that second night, his suit as crisp as ever. "Congrats, man," he said, handing me a beer from a nearby bar. "You're killing it. Oh, and by the way, she's been trying to buy back your company shares. Told her it's too late." I let out a laugh, tapping my beer bottle against Damien's. "Let her keep scrambling, I'm doing just fine right here." He nodded, glancing around the gallery. "This is all you, Owen, not her shadow. You should see her face when she gets wind of this." I didn't need to imagine it, I could already picture those perfect brows knitting together, her lips pinching tight. But it didn't matter anymore. This gallery was mine. Those photos were mine. And the folks who'd bought them saw me, not Vivienne's brand. Camille strolled over, her paint-splattered jeans a stark contrast to Damien's sharp suit. "You pulled it off," she said, giving me a nudge. "Told you there was something real in you." "Couldn't have done it without you," I said, and I meant every word. She shrugged it off, but her eyes showed she understood. The three of us stood there as the last visitors trickled out, the gallery falling quiet again. I looked at the bare walls, the sold tags still tacked up, and felt this fullness, not just pride, but something I'd lost touch with years ago. This was my ticket back to myself, signed and sealed in Paris. I didn't need Vivienne's nod or her empire. I had this moment, and it was more than enough. I woke up on my last day in Paris to a calm that felt like the hush after a storm, soft, steady, and all mine. I'm Owen Archer, and this week had been about rewriting who I am, step by step, photo by photo, until I wasn't just Vivienne's husband anymore. The room at L'Hôtel Matin Bleu felt a little tighter now, like I'd grown bigger than its walls, my bags half packed by the window. I wasn't sure where I'd head next, maybe back home, maybe somewhere fresh. But one thing was clear, I wasn't the same guy who'd stumbled off that plane. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand, the screen flickering to life with a single new message. It was from her, sent just past midnight. "Do you still love me?" I stared at it, the words cutting through the gentle morning light. Classic Vivienne, going straight for the heart when she was desperate. I could see her typing it, probably holed up in some fancy hotel suite, her nails tapping the screen, waiting for me to fold like I always used to. My thumb lingered over the reply button, old instincts whispering to say yes, to smooth things over, to give her a lifeline. But I didn't. I hit delete, the message vanishing like it never existed, and set the phone down. No reply, no drama, just peace. I didn't owe her a damn thing anymore. I got up, slipped on a sweater, and headed out, the city calling me for one final spin. Montmartre's streets were waking up, bakers hauling out trays, kids giggling on their way to school, and I wandered with no hurry, letting it all soak in. Paris had given me more than I'd bargained for, a camera I'd rediscovered, a sold-out gallery, a backbone I'd forgotten I owned. I ended up at a little bookstore cafe by the Seine, a cozy spot with mismatched chairs and shelves crammed with books. I ordered a coffee, snagged a plain journal from the rack, nothing fancy, no leather like Vivienne's gifts, and settled by the window, the river sparkling outside. The pen felt right in my hand, solid, like it was meant to be there. I flipped to the first page and wrote, Owen Archer, artist. Done being Vivienne's sidekick. Done being stuck, just soaring. The words flowed easy, no second guessing, no hesitation. It wasn't some epic tale, just a beginning, but it belonged to me. I sipped the coffee, its bitterness grounding me, and watched the river move. People passed by, tourists with maps, locals toting bags of bread, and I didn't feel like a ghost anymore. I thought back on the week, Damien's sly grin at the summit, Camille's quiet nudge at the workshop, the gallery walls stripped bare from sold prints. They'd seen me, not her shadow, and that was enough to carry me forward. My phone buzzed once, twice, but I didn't glance at it. Let Vivienne send whatever, more apologies, threats, or questions. It didn't matter. I'd said all I needed to by walking away, by building something real here. The cafe was getting lively, voices merging into a soft buzz, and I kept scribbling, ideas for new photos, places I might wander to, scenes I wanted to capture through my lens. The pages filled up quick, each one a step further from the guy who'd stood at that airport, gripping a suitcase, watching Vivienne's jet disappear into the sky. As I finished my coffee, it hit me, I didn't hate her, didn't even miss her. She was just a chapter wrapping up. This journal, this city, this version of me, it was the start of something new. I paid the tab, tucked the journal under my arm, and stepped outside. The air was sharp, the Seine flowing steady beside me. I strolled along its banks, my boots clicking on the pavement, and felt the weight of her last message lift clean away. No, I didn't love her, not the way she wanted, not the way that kept me chained. I was in love with this instead, the freedom, the calm, the guy I was turning into. I paused on a bridge, leaning against the railing, and watched a boat glide by. Paris sprawled around me, its lights twinkling as dusk settled in. I'd fly out tomorrow, but I wasn't leaving with nothing. I had a new story, a first chapter penned in my own hand, and that was plenty to carry with me. I stood on that bridge over the Seine, the cold metal railing biting into my palms, watching the boat vanish around a curve. I'm Owen Archer, and this was my final night in Paris, a city that had torn me down and rebuilt me in ways I never saw coming. The air was crisp now, nipping at my nose, and the lights along the river danced like they were giving me a private show. I wasn't ready to say goodbye, not deep down. But I knew I couldn't stay forever. Tomorrow I'd board a plane, heading back to a life I'd have to piece together from the ground up. Tonight, though, was still mine. I zipped my jacket tighter and started walking again, no destination, just a hunger to soak up every last drop of this place. The streets were quieter now, the crowds thinning as Paris eased into the evening. I passed a guy with an accordion, his melody slow and soulful, and tossed a few coins into his hat. He gave a nod, not missing a note, and I kept moving, the music trailing behind me like a faint echo. I thought about the journal in my bag, the one I'd started at the cafe, those words I'd written, Owen Archer, artist. Calling myself that still felt a little weird, but it fit better than Vivienne's husband ever did. I wondered what she was up to, probably back home by now, pacing our old living room, snapping at Chloe or her lawyers. That last text of hers, "Do you still love me?" kept creeping into my head, but not because I wanted to reply. It was more like a fading whisper from a life I'd walked away from. No guilt, no tug of war, just done. I veered onto a street I hadn't seen before, narrow and lined with old lanterns spilling pools of light onto the cobblestones. A small bar caught my eye, nothing fancy, just a wooden sign creaking above the door that read Limpasse. Sounded like my kind of spot. I pushed inside, the warmth wrapping around me like a blanket. The place was cozy, half full, with low ceilings and tables scarred from years of stories. I ordered a whiskey at the bar, the bartender pouring it without a word, and carried it to a corner by the window. The glass felt solid in my hand, the amber liquid catching the dim light, and I sipped it slow, letting the burn settle in my chest. A guy at the next table was sketching on a napkin, his pencil scratching out quick lines, and I watched him for a bit, feeling that urge to grab my camera. I didn't, though, just sat there, taking it all in. Then the door creaked open, and Camille stepped in. She spotted me right away, her dark hair down tonight, a scarf hanging loose around her neck. "Well, look who's here," she said, sliding into the chair across from me like she owned the place. "Figured you'd be knee-deep in packing by now," Camille said, settling into the chair. I grinned, setting my whiskey glass down. "Nah, wanted to give Paris a proper send-off first. What about you?" She shrugged, flagging down the bartender for a glass of wine. "I live here, but this spot's my go-to when I need to think." We sat there for a bit, the bar's low hum filling the quiet between us. Her gaze met mine, steady like it was back at the workshop. "You're not the same guy anymore," she said, not asking, just stating it plain. "Yeah," I nodded, feeling the truth of it. "I'm starting to notice that myself." She took a sip of her wine, leaning in a bit. "That uncropped exhibit, it wasn't just a bunch of photos, was it? It was you piecing together who you really are." I thought about how those images had yanked me out of Vivienne's shadow. Pretty much. Took me a while to figure that out. Her smile was small but genuine. Most folks never do. They just stay stuck, half cut out of the frame. We talked for hours, about art, Paris, the way life cracks open and stitches itself back together. She shared details about her next project, something wild with sound and light, and I opened up about the journal, how I wanted to keep this spark alive wherever I ended up next. My whiskey dwindled, the bar cleared out, but we stayed put. It wasn't flirty, nothing romantic, just two people who clicked, and that felt solid, like a steady hand in all this new freedom. When the bartender hollered for last call, we stepped outside, the cold air jolting me awake. "You'll come back," Camille said, tugging her scarf tighter. "Paris doesn't let go that easy." "Maybe," I said with a grin, "or maybe I'll carry it with me." She let out a laugh, gave a quick wave, and vanished into the dark street. I headed back to the hotel alone, the city hushed now, my breath puffing out in little clouds. I packed my bags, slipping the journal in last, and flopped onto the bed, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow I'd be gone, but tonight I was still here, still Owen, still soaring.